Hi folks, Dino Bob here with episode 3 of the Elebbin Park Challenge, doing the update 11 build through with adapting as we go along with all the new stuff that's coming through for update 11. All so much work in progress in many cases. So today it's Psittacosaurus exhibit time, which will be the bulk of what we're doing today. This is where we ended up after the last episode. Spinning around now. And we're going to start by putting in some paths. I want to establish more of the plaza area just inside the ticket booths. Some of it for the future, some of it to get the area that we'll be working from today into place so that the habitat, today's habitat, can be put in the right place in the park. So we're going to be jumping back and forth between speed build and non-speed build because this habitat took a lot more time to make than the Liaonosaura one last week, and therefore much longer in the speed build department. So just some general area laying out there. And now a new path type for going into the area that's just opposite the amenities building, that's a stand-in for the bigger building to come when the park is bigger. And it's going to be a wetlands area for the Cretaceous. So the first bit of path going down there is, if you will, the main path, and trying to get it feeding off from the fossil path that the plaza uses, and then subsidiary paths as well. The idea here is to make sort of a wander through this area and soak some of the guests off into seeing exhibits or just wandering down a different path, and thus the sort of winding spaghetti tangle of pathing. The next step is to put some elevation in. I want this habitat to have higher and lower areas, and taking advantage of that at the moment to put in elevated area that will come into play in later parts of the park's build. Having put in the rough elevation, it's fencing time, and I wanted something fairly rustic, like you might perhaps find in a swamp or other wetlands area, something that looks kind of dilapidated. So it's a Stone Age fence this time. Simple 1 meter, a little bit off the path so our guests don't get fingers within reach of Psittacosaurus beaks. I did mess around a little bit getting the path where I wanted it to be. Excuse me, not the path, the fence. The fence where I wanted it to be, so you'll see a little bit of that coming and going. And I wanted it to come down fairly sharply on at least part of it. And that showed up one of the problems with the fences right now, in that their foundations don't always show up like they're supposed to. And that can be addressed with modular pieces. And I will be doing a temporary version of that a little bit later in the video, because the park doesn't have enough money yet to afford another theme that would give me the modular piece I want to use for it. So that's pretty much the habitat in terms of its size. Excuse me. And its ground cover and planting, all this basic stuff getting done. You can see me pulling the ground textures out near the paths, and so the paths are less stark than most of the other paths in the park compared to the groundwork next to them, and that's intentional. Water was the first thing I wanted to put in. It's in the lowest part of the habitat, and then of course there's the follow-on necessity of smoothing it down so the animals aren't doing nosedives when they come to take a drink. Additional smoothing because I wanted the higher areas, again, not drop-offs most places, but also putting in more texture, which is sometimes more successful than other times, and sometimes needs to be redone. And pulling the vegetation out into the pathing area. The papyrus that I decided to use for the edging plants for the water area, of course, dropped down very densely despite a relatively low setting. So a lot of editing going on there. Just got too dense for my tastes. And behind that, I want to have bushes. So the mangroves seem to be the obvious choice, but treating them more like bushes than trees with their extended roots. And time to go to the nursery, grab the Psittacosaurus and get it incubating, which happens pretty quickly. So not a lot to do in between it showing up and then being able to use it for a guide to whether the vegetation and water levels are sufficient for it. In the meantime, I'm still playing with it before doing the check. I decided to move most of the pines up to the elevated area and leave the lower portions for the swamp beech trees. Check the animal again and make sure it's getting things that it wants, and it seems to be reasonably happy. And then the usual sorts of edits to get plants closer to fences rather than leaving that sort of tiger run where they check the boundaries all the time and wear the plants down. A little bit of rock where the drop-off is steep, just for a little variety. And need an open area for putting down the feeder in the center. In this part of the update, this was after last week's drop, and the feeders come full now, even though they're still not working. But this is the modular piece I was talking about, you just saw, to do that drop off. My intention to have something more than plain concrete in the future. So it's looking pretty good, aside from the fact that the animals can't eat their food and are always hungry. I did have a problem when I tried to do null fencing originally out here. Was it the chain mesh fencing? In any case, it caused the habitat not to recognize as a habitat. So I tried this alternative of adding the same kind of fencing, and it worked. The habitat is recognized. So the next step was swapping out the fence, and this time it is definitely the chain link, because this is where the habitat building is going to be for letting the animals sleep. And it still recognizes the habitat this way. So that was good. Yeah, a little bit of time me thinking about it and making sure the layout looks decent, which kind of ended up not being good enough, which you'll see shortly, because it's time to start the building. And having put the building in place, that little runway didn't work out the way I was envisioning it working out. So the mesh fence mostly hides underneath the buildings, but for some reason I'm not clear on, the fencing, even though it's set at 4 meters, is to the outside of the 4-meter block. And you can see it against that wall. Ultimately, I will have to do something about that. It's going to get a green roof. That's the plan from the get-go, and there you can see how the runway didn't line up. I'll deal with that in a bit. Not a very long bit, but there it is. And now I have a much bigger opening that I need to close down. These are relatively small animals for a prehistoric kingdom, so they don't need a giant doorway. I want to give it a little bit of character and also conceal the fact that those partial wall panels do not match up well on this wall skin. The poles are smaller than on the base wall skins. So kind of awkward. Decided it was too tall, in part because I wanted to do a sort of a skylight effect for the animal area. So you see me messing around with it as I work out alternatives. The green roof is like the walls. It's of course from the Stone Age theme. Same deal I used in the Lialanosaura building. Yeah, okay. And the doors, of course, only come in the one height, so they always stick up higher if you try to pull the walls down. But one of the things I wanted to do as an end of the build part in this was take a look at the excavations. And before doing that, you've got to have the excavations building in place to get the excavations menu to work. So that's what I'm putting in right now. I decided to join it up with the research center because it's also research, I guess, and lining it up so it's all on the same level. And bang, there it is. So that will allow us to take a look at the excavation system. And this is me redoing it because of some reason that I no longer remember. So there, it really is there this time. And let's go to the menu. We hit the excavations. We hit the plus sign to get us our team. And then we find our site that we want to use, left click it, and then assign our team to it and tell them to go to work. And we'll leave them to it and pick that up next week. So time for some animal pictures. Our Psittacosaurus was being cooperative and being interesting while I was trying to get this footage. Looking around its habitat and moving around and not too often disappearing into the foliage, which is just fine. Ignore the empty feeder. There's nothing I can do about it at this time. There's something going on over there. I couldn't figure out what it was, but the Psittacosaurus seemed to think it was something it might be concerned about. There was a little bit more running around, but then the sun started to go down, so the Psittacosaurus sat down, and it's coming to the end of the day and also the end of the video. So nap time for Psittacosaurus. Like, comment, subscribe if you haven't. Time for viewers, assuming you're so inclined. Thanks for stopping by. I hope to see you in next week's video. And till then, be kind to each other, take care, and just have a good time. Dino Bob signing off.